background ambience for our level using area loops and source loops. But most things in the natural world don't loop. They happen every now and again at random time intervals. We're going to learn a few different approaches to creating the random one-shots that will bring our ambience to life. We're going to start in the lakeside area, and at the moment we've just got that ambient loop for the whole area. What we're going to do is to create a sound cue for some frogs. So in our audio folder, add new, sounds, sound cue, frog 01, demo. I'm going to double click to open the sound cue editor and then find some of the frog sounds that I've already imported. I'm going to select all 12 of these, and then in my sound cue editor, I can actually add them all at once pre-attached to a random node. You can see you've got choices of pre-attaching them to various nodes. In our case, we're going to use the random. Now what we want this to do is every now and again choose one of these sounds. So this whole system is going to loop around and around, so we want a looping node. Just be sure to recognize that the looping node is used for looping sound systems. It is not the same as creating a looping wave player. So if you want a seamless loop, you need to create a looping wave player. However, if you're looping a system, that's what we use the looping node for. So it's going to loop around the system, and every now and again, with a random delay, let's say between 0.3 seconds and 0.7, it's going to randomly pick one of these sounds to play. So let's hear what that sound cue sounds like. Now, because it starts the delay after each sound has finished playing, and because the sounds are a similar kind of length, well, what we're getting is almost a looping kind of feel to that. So what we want to do is make our delays a little bit longer and a little bit more varying. So we get a slightly more random kind of rhythm to it. Now we've got our frog demo. We'll just save that, drag it into the world, and as usual, give it some attenuation settings, and then hear how that fits when it's sat against the background area loop. I might then make another copy by holding down Alt to add some other frogs on the other side of this jetty. Then I'm just going to bring the volume down a bit on both of them. Next, we're going to create some water splashes as if there's some fish that pop up every now and again in our lake. So right click, sounds, sound cue, fish, splash, double click to open up the sound cue editor. Find the sounds that have been imported already, water splash. Again, I'm going to select all of them, and then in my sound cue editor, I can add them pre-attached to a random node, create my looping system. Now what I'm going to add now, unlike the frogs, is a modulator node. So every time it randomly chooses one of these sounds to play, we're actually going to pick a random volume. Sometimes it's going to play them really quietly, and sometimes a bit less so. When auditioning sound cues, it's really useful to be able to play individual sections of the system. So for example, if we put our delay in here, which is what we're going to want for the sound to play every now and again, so perhaps it's going to play a minimum of 1 second and maybe 3. In the final game, I would make this much less frequent, but we're just auditioning it at the moment, so we want to hear it. If I want to audition the whole sound cue, press play. Obviously, I'm going to be waiting for that delay every time. But say I wanted to just audition how the volumes are changing, I could select the modulator node and then play node, and it's going to play the system from that node onwards. So I can hear those changes in volume and just make sure that that is happening in the right range. Now we go back to our level, save our sound cue, Control and S, and drag it in, give it some attenuation settings, and then hear it in context. Okay, so we're auditioning it. It sounds okay, but obviously it's far too frequent. We might make another copy of it further away. Now go back into that and change that delay to something more like, I don't want to hear a splash any more frequently than 6 seconds. And perhaps sometimes it might wait as long as 14 seconds. And we'd spend some time auditioning that and listening to the environment for quite a while to see if that is an appropriate setting. We can, of course, create sound cues that are a combination of looping sounds and one-shots. So if we go back into the village, we see that there is a well, and for this we're going to create a new sound cue. We're going to just check our filter so that we can actually find that again. So in this sound cue, what I'm going to have is a looping layer. So I'm going to create a mixer, find my well loop, make sure that that is a looping wave player. And then we're going to add some one-shot drips. Find the drips. Now, it's always worth thinking carefully about the context for your sound. So for example, that first sound, this one, doesn't sound great in isolation. It feels like it just cuts off a bit too early. But when it's sat against this loop, it's going to have a bit of a masking effect on the sound. When you're editing, you can pay a lot of attention to detail and be convinced that your sounds are just too dirty or cut off too abruptly like that one. But actually, when you bed it against another sound, it masks some of those elements. And so actually, in context, the sound works perfectly well. Create a looping node. We will have a delay of, let's say, 0.222. We'll have a modulator node so that the volume changes 0.1 to say 0.45. Okay, my background loop is a bit noisy compared to the other one. So overall this is going to be quite quiet in the level anyway. Another thing to note while we're in the sound cue editor is that if I do decide I really don't like that drip, I can simply pick another sound, drop it on top, and it will overwrite it with that new sound. Back in the level, just behind us, we've got this ambient sound actor that I've added already. It uses a very similar sound cue setup. We've got a looping wave player playing the fire loop. What I've actually done is I've used the same sound that I used for the torches, but I've actually changed the pitch. So now it has a different kind of feel to it. And over the top of it, we've got this random fish sizzling as the oil from the fish drips onto the fire. The problem with the looping and delay approach is that the delay only starts when each sound finishes, and so you don't get overlaps in the sound. So sometimes what you might want to do is to set up something like this, which is the Blackbird sound cue. We've got our Blackbird sounds here, we're randomly choosing, but now you can see we've got a mixer, and actually this is duplicated several times. So we may have some of these sounds now able to overlap with other sounds. It is, of course, easy to get carried away with building very sophisticated sound cues and creating these wonderful ambiences. But you've got to also be aware of the number of voices that you're taking up. So for example, this one has the potential to actually take up 3 voices. Now, when you think that the default for most platforms is 32 voices, this might be a relatively minor part of the ambience with lots of other things going on in the game. That's something that we just need to be aware of. We've developed our understanding of the sound cue editor, and we've looked at how to create randomized one-shots that are going to bring your game environment to life. We've also looked at a few tips that will help you work more efficiently in the sound cue editor.